everybody. I'm Lara Trump coming to you from Studio 45 at Trump Tower in New York City. The media are calling this Trump's lost summer, but it's actually Trump's summer of winning. Joining me is the former CEO of CKE Restaurants, Andy Puzder. Andy, great to have you back.
Great to be here.
Thank you so much. Now, the left, of course, claims all kinds of different things. We hear them all the time, but they claim the sky is falling, the disaster is, we're on the brink of disaster. Let's take a look at this video.
A G7 meeting over in France, and the president got a lot accomplished there.
During the G7 summit, he also announced a trade deal with Japan.
Millions and billions of dollars. Tremendous for the farmers.
These new rules really bolster President Trump's long-standing belief that legal immigration should be merit-based.
The president just announced an agreement with the EU to open up European markets to U.S. beef.
Today we celebrate the revolution in American energy that's helping make our economy the envy of the world. We're going to keep winning and winning and winning.
All right, Andy, seems like maybe the media is off here. Maybe the Democrats are wrong. What's your take on things?
Well, I think it's the Democrats using this Chicken Little approach to economics that the sky is falling because they have to. If people understand how strong this economy is and how much the president's doing for the country, the president's going to win this election hands down. I think he's going to win the election hands down anyway.
Agree with you there.
But unless they can beat him up on the economy, they got no shot.
Yeah.
And so they're doing everything they can to scare the American people into thinking we're into some kind of economic crisis when we clearly are not.
I'm trying to figure out why people would vote against their own best interest. When people have more money to spend now, when they got a break on their taxes, when so many of these things that the Democrats claimed were false, but they feel them every day. They physically have more money to spend, or they can afford to send their kid to a better school or whatever it might be. Why would they vote against that? I always try and figure this out.
I don't think they will. I mean, you've got more people working than have ever worked in the history of the country. Wages have been up over 3% for every year over year for a straight 12 months now.
Yeah.
That means if you earn the average hourly wage, that means you're taking home about $1,500 more just because of the increase in wages generally. Not even if you got a raise or promotion, it's even more. With tax cuts, you're probably taking home another $1,400. So you've got about $3,000 more in your pocket than you did before President Trump was elected. And I think Democrats may find out that it's more important what's in voters' wallets than it is what's trending on Twitter.
I always say people vote with their wallets and their pocketbooks. Now, you just published an article entitled U.S. Economy is Going Strong, Bad News for Dems, Good News for Trump and America. Tell me about this article.
Well, there's been a lot of talk about a possible recession when the yield curve inverted, which is a very technical measurement that really doesn't show that the economy is going downhill at all. It's really not a reliable indicator. But when you talk about a recession, you're talking about 2 consecutive quarters of negative economic growth, so negative GDP. Well, so far this year, we've had a 3.1% quarter and a 2% quarter. So you're averaging about 2.6%. You're nowhere near negative. Right. The consumer spending last year drove 68% of our GDP. Consumer spending, we just had the strongest quarter since 2014, and it was the second strongest quarter since 2003.
Wow.
And we just got July's number, which is in third quarter, and that went up much more than people thought it was going to go up. So consumer spending is very strong. Government spending is about 18% of GDP. We all know government spending's up.
Always up.
Yeah. And when exports grow faster than imports, our trade deficit declines.
Yep.
And when that happens, GDP grows, and that's another element of GDP, and that's been positive for us. The news just came out recently that the trade deficit was down, I think, $1.8 billion, which is a significant number.
Yeah.
And then finally, the one thing that does seem to have slowed is business investment. And business investment slowed for a number of reasons. One is outside the United States, there is something of a global recession. I mean, other countries are having problems. Two, the dollar is very strong, which makes it difficult for people in other countries to buy American goods. So that's having an impact on business investment. So you've got, and then the trade war with China, that's creating some fears.
Right.
But look, we have to fight this trade war with China.
Oh.
And when are we going to fight? We're going to fight it now, or are we going to fight it when our economy's hurting?
Right.
So there is some slowdown due to that, but there's a big difference between a slowdown and a recession.
Yeah.
American workers continue to make more money. They continue to spend more money. The economy's doing fine. This is all this talk about a recession is a subterfuge to try and make it look like the economy's weak.
It's hard, again, to argue against those facts, but to your point, I think the only shot that the Democrats have is to try and at least scare people into the idea that there could be a recession. Andy Puzder is not worried about a recession.
Not at all.
You feel very good about things. Something that you mentioned earlier was this trade situation with China. Here's the reality. It should have been dealt with a long time ago,
30
right?
years ago.
And nobody wanted to tackle it because it's a tough thing to do. It's a tough thing to negotiate. You obviously have a little bit of, it's going to hurt people right here at the beginning before you get a trade deal, which we've seen, with some folks in this country. But long term and overall, why is this so important for the economy?
We can't let the Chinese continue to steal our intellectual property, continue to hack into our data and steal our data, to restrict American companies who want to do business in China. Unlike we don't restrict Chinese companies that want, at least we didn't used to, that wanted to do business here.
Right.
They cheat, they steal, they do everything they possibly can to gain dominance over us. And for decades, we just kept feeding them and feeding them.
Everybody's ignored it.
I'll say a couple things. One is, this president has brought that issue to the forefront, and there is almost unanimous bipartisan support for the fact that we have to do something about China.
Right.
That didn't exist prior to Donald Trump. Now, they don't agree with his approach to it, but during an election, they can't.
Of course.
But this is the only approach.
Yeah.
You remember during the election, during the campaign, when Barack Obama stood up and said, Donald Trump says he's going to renegotiate these deals. Well, why would they renegotiate? What magic wand does he have? Well, tariffs aren't a magic wand, but having a president who's willing to implement them and use them,
Correct.
to use the tools we have, that is a magic wand. So we're beginning to see people support doing something with China. Number two, 2 years ago, if we had a discussion on China, people viewed it as this economic monolith that was going to have 8, 9, 10% GDP growth, for decades into the future and take us over. Now we're seeing the cracks in the Chinese economy. We're seeing that their GDP has slowed. I wouldn't be surprised if it slowed to zero. They're reporting 6%, but they never tell the truth about their economic numbers. And they can very much inflated. I wouldn't be at all surprised if it was zero.
Wow.
And we're seeing real cracks. They're losing jobs. And most importantly, and the president gets this, he brings it up in tweets, and it's actually more important than even he emphasizes it. They're losing supply chain. In other words, people who manufacture goods in China are moving to other countries to avoid the tariffs. Even though they're not the United States, they may move to Thailand or Vietnam. Once they move those supply chains, they're gone.
Yeah.
You are not going to move them back. It's a one-way ticket. Wow. So even though they talk about Chinese losing access to American consumers, well, you can get those back. But what they're losing that they can't get back is access to the supply chain.
Wow.
And so they're in. I'm glad to hear that we're going to be negotiating again. I think we've got a very good team to do that. Mnuchin's great.
Yes.
Lighthouser's great. And Peter Navarro's a buddy. I like Peter too. He does a great job. And we need to be involved in these negotiations, but the president's handling it just right. He's being very tough and very friendly. Just like Reagan was with Gorbachev.
Yeah.
Very tough, but very friendly.
And we see how that worked out. That worked out very well. And the funny thing is that Donald Trump has been talking about China and the fact that they've been ripping us off and doing the United States wrong since the 80s. He has said somebody needs to stand up and do this. Now that he's president, and we know he's a great negotiator, I think he is the perfect person to do this. I think we all look forward to seeing a great result here, and we'll keep our fingers crossed on that.
Absolutely.
And as always, Andy, it's great to have you in.
Same to be here, and congratulations on the baby.
Thank you so much. We'll look forward to having you back soon.
Anytime.
With a still booming economy and a summer of winning, the only ones who are lost these days are the Democrats and their friends in the mainstream media. That's the real news for today. I'm Laura Trump from Studio 45 at Trump Tower in New York City. Thanks for joining us, everybody.